Hello, everyone. We're just waiting for we're just waiting for people to enter the room. So we'll just take about 2 minutes um, to wait and let people get a chance to come in. My name is Nihal, and these are some pictures from of Dr. Javed, who we'll be speaking to today. And Dr. David, I believe the last couple of pictures are of the polio vaccination um,
Mhm.
the initiative that you just started, if I'm right. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, this reproductive health unit,
hmm
a postnatal ward.
Yeah, yeah. I think these are
Yeah.
the polio
No,
vaccine.
this one was a patient that was brought to us from Gaza City. She had a fracture in her right tibia.
Gotcha.
This is, I believe, polio vaccination. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to just get started here until this video plays out. Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's Gaza Chronicle, where we'll be talking to Dr. Javed Ali. And for those of you who are here with us for the first time, the Gaza Chronicles is a speaker series that focuses on the ongoing genocide and obviously devastating humanitarian crisis in Gaza. And these are just basically conversations that we have with, powerful voices inside Gaza and outside, all working together to advocate, raise awareness, inspire action, and in some cases, like Dr. Javed Ali, literally save lives. So I wanted to start by just reminding us what we are addressing here today. And I'm going to do that by sharing some numbers with you. And these are from OSHA, the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. So today is day 332 of the genocide. That's almost a year. Between October 7th and August 29th, just a few days ago, almost 41,000 Palestinians were killed, and I believe that number is not accurate. I think it's more up to like 45. And close to 94,000 people are injured. Obviously, amputees and very sort of serious injuries. More than 14,000 children have been killed. And then we've got the experts warning that this will be the largest cohort of pediatric amputees in history. So just imagine the scale of that whole generation. The number of unaccompanied and separated children in Gaza is likely now 3 to 5% of the overall displaced population. They're literally being found in hospitals, living there alone, due to lack of obviously anyone caring for them. And 41% of families in Gaza are caring for children that are not their own. 1 million children are in need of mental health and psychosocial support, and 1.9 million persons are internally displaced. That's 90% of the population. 96 of the analyzed population, that's 2.15 million people, is projected to face crisis or worse levels of food insecurity. And more than 70,000 housing units have been destroyed in Gaza. I think this number was only a couple of months ago, so it's more now. And of course, as many of you have heard, the first detected case of polio, which was eradicated 25 years ago in Gaza, has been identified in a toddler just recently. So on that very sobering note, a few days ago, one of our members, our very valued members, the International Medical Corps, let us know that the Senior Director of Emergency Response, who leads the IMC organization's sort of response in Gaza, was on a very short trip outside of Gaza to visit family, and we jumped at the opportunity to speak to him because this is a very rare look inside, what's like someone on the front lines. And then for those of you who are not familiar with the International Medical Corps, let me just give you a little background. So the International Medical Corps is a nonprofit humanitarian organization and global first responder. They deliver emergency medical and related services to those in conflict, disaster, and disease-affected areas, no matter where and no matter what the conditions. This is the part that I personally like. They also train people in their communities, providing them with the skills they need to recover and to chart their own path to self-reliance. So the IMC was actually established by volunteer doctors and nurses. That was in 1984. And now they have more than 8,500 staff members around the world, more than 96% who are local, and like local to the area that's being that the IMC is working in. And then let me just a couple of housekeeping things before I get started. We'll keep the last 15 minutes of our talk for any questions. If you could please use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen rather than the chat, that makes it easier for us to find the questions. And also this episode is going to be recorded and it will be available on YouTube and our website, should you want to refer back to it. And now without further ado, let me introduce Dr. Javed Ali. I'm going to read out his very, very illustrious bio. Dr. Ali's career began in 2011 at Doctors Without Borders. During his time with the organization, he served as the clinical activity manager for the reconstructive surgical program for victims of war in Syria, Yemen, Iraq, Palestine, and Jordan. He was also the country medical coordinator in Nigeria, the exploratory mission coordinator in Libya, and he was also the medical referent in South Sudan and the country medical coordinator in Pakistan. Dr. Javed is now the senior director in International Medical Corps' Emergency Response Unit. He led the humanitarian organization's initial response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine and has helped lead the organization's response to COVID-19 and other emergencies. Previously, Dr. Ali served as medical coordinator with International Corps in Amman, and now he is leading the entire IMC response inside Gaza. Thank you, Dr. Javed, for being with us today. You're very kind to spend some of that very limited and precious time that you have with your family, so we're very grateful that you were able to come on here with us.
No, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here, and I would like to share some of my experience that I went through in Gaza with the audience. So thank you for providing that opportunity.
It's really our pleasure. So Dr. Javed, can you tell me a little bit just about yourself? I mean, I read your bio, but just a little bit about your journey to this point, and how you ended up being the senior director of the response in Gaza.
Yeah, so I come from the northern part of Pakistan, from the Hindu Kush Mountains, and early on I saw my dad. He was a maintained worker, so I always wanted to follow his footsteps. Fortunately, in the country that I come from, I didn't really have a lot of options. So I ended up becoming a doctor, and then right after my medical graduation, instead of choosing a clinical career, I started working in the humanitarian sector from 2008 onwards, in fact. And my introduction to IMC was in 2000, I believe it was 2014, when I was in South Sudan for the first time. And that's when I met them. I was working with another organization, and IMC was running a surgical project in a place called WOW in South Sudan. So I was very impressed with their work, and I always wanted to experience working for this agency. And I finally got the chance. I was working in the region, as you mentioned early on, for the reconstructive surgical programs that MSF had in Yemen, Syria, Iraq, and other places. So I was managing that hospital. And that's where I had an opportunity to pass by IMC's office, and they happened to have a vacancy, and I got in and I started working as a medical coordinator. And then a year down the road, I saw this opportunity in the emergency response unit. And by background, I'm an emergency response specialist. That was my role with MSF as well for most of the years that I worked with them. So I moved in, and one thing leading to another. I took the position of senior director for the emergency response unit. In fact, for Gaza, Gaza, we were not expecting this magnitude of crisis. We were not expecting this level of crisis. So I was actually in charge, trying to find a way to access the population that was caught up in conflict in Sudan, on the eastern side of Sudan, in the Darfur region. So I was trying to organize this cross-border program from Chad into Darfur when the Gaza crisis started on the 7th of October. So a week later, I came back to Jordan and had a conversation with the senior leadership in the organization. We came up with a response strategy, and I started working on it. And I have this general philosophy that I follow. Gaza being a war zone where safety and security can never always be ensured. I didn't feel comfortable sending a team in, so um, I wanted to do it myself first, so that I feel comfortable deploying people there. And once I went in, I didn't feel like coming back to my routine work, and I stayed in Gaza since 25th of December. And currently, I'm the emergency team lead. It's basically titled means nothing. In fact, most of the work is done by those 890 national staff that we have, and my fellow 16, 17 expatriate staff who are deployed there, and a lot of people in the background in the organization that are providing, the support that the organization needs to maintain the response effort inside Gaza. And I happen to be the main interlocutor between the field team and the headquarters. So, as a title of a team leader. So yeah, that's in a nutshell how I ended up in Gaza.
So you've essentially been there since the 25th of December, with just a couple of little breaks in between.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I couldn't manage to go in earlier than that. Access was rather limited, and I had some visa issues to get into Gaza. But we managed to send a team. In fact, 5 of our international team members managed to cross into Gaza on the 19th of November. Those are the real heroes. I mean, at that time, um, even thinking about going to Gaza was quite a challenge. But we managed to send a 5 members team to go in and do an evaluation of the health system, and as well as the needs on ground. So yeah, I worked in the background, and finally, once I managed to get the administrative hurdles out of the way, I crossed the border on 25th through Egypt, and since then I've been out on 2 occasions for short visits to Amman. Yeah.
I can't imagine what that's like, but can you also, Dr. Javed, describe kind of just the whole IMC operation, what you've got, like what you've been able to set up, what the IMC has been able to provide in terms of services and the hospitals? Can you describe that
Yeah.
for us?
Yeah, I mean, we have a very comprehensive, response package in Gaza. We were lucky that we already had a long history of operation in Gaza. We had 68 staff members before the 7th of October. We had been working in Gaza since 2008. Our work was rather limited to protection and mental health services, and we were implementing health programs through 2 local partners, but those were small in scale. And tailored to specific community groups. But when this crisis started, and right at the beginning, we knew that this was going to be a different one. This was going to be a much more grand in terms of its scale and magnitude. So with our senior leadership, we came up with a plan to establish a field hospital. Our initial plan was to establish one field hospital with 50 beds, in a relatively safe area, to support the Ministry of Health. Because back then, and this was an idea that was conceived around 14th of October. The idea was basically to support the existing health facilities. There were more than 30 hospitals that were operating in Gaza, and we were not expecting all those hospitals to close down. Yes, we did expect certain population subsets to be cut off from services, to lose access to healthcare. So our idea was to establish a field hospital to support and sustain the health relief efforts that were being largely led by the local hospitals. So it was supposed to be a 50-bed hospital in the beginning with just and just trauma surgery and orthopedic surgery. And we managed to implement that on the 4th of January. But right after we started with this hospital, we realized that the needs are far more grave than what we were, um, kind of anticipating from afar. So we basically let the hospital grow kind of organically in that context. So we started seeing gaps in the health service delivery in Gaza. We saw that there were a lot of services that were not becoming available, and gradually we saw hospitals being closed down. We saw population moving to areas where there were no existing health facilities, and we also saw rather more ambitious, incursions from IDF. So it was necessary for us to basically enhance the response package. So currently we have got two hospitals. The hospital was initially established at the intersection of Rafah and Khan Yunis, but then we had to relocate it several times. But currently we have got two hospitals. One is in Dar al Bala. It's a predominant trauma center with maternity services incorporated within. It's a 200-bed facility. It offers trauma surgery, orthopedic surgery, vascular surgery, nerve repair surgery, thoracic surgery, ENT, and as well as many other subspecialties. And along with that, we have got a reproductive health unit, or what we call in public health jargon, a CMONC unit, or comprehensive emergency obstetric and newborn care unit, which has about 30 beds. It's basically a center that serves as a referral facility for all pregnant women who are in labor, and specifically for complicated pregnancies. So as part of it, we have got a labor room, a delivery room, and two postnatal wards. And then we have got a neonatal ICU because we deal with a lot of complicated pregnancies, and very often it results in a complicated baby or a newborn. So we have got a new neonatal intensive care unit, which is a level 2 neonatal intensive care unit with about 16 beds. And then aside from that, we have got another inpatient unit that focuses on rehabilitation, both physiological and psychological rehabilitation of patients who have severe acute malnutrition. To complement the hospital, we have got a laboratory, a running blood bank, a small radiological unit. We don't have much. We have got 2 mobile X-rays, and we have got a couple of ultrasound machines. And then we have got 4 operating theaters inside this hospital. So it's a very busy hospital. It's the main trauma referral center for the entire middle area. So all the mass casualties, all the casualties because of this war or accidental otherwise, they are brought to our hospital. So we have basically a 22-bed emergency room where these patients are initially brought in, triaged, and then disposed accordingly. We have got a second hospital in a place called Zawaida, which is a few kilometers north of Dar al Bala. This hospital has got about 72 beds. We have got 2 operating theaters there. But what makes this hospital special is that it has got a very comprehensive primary healthcare service as well. So aside from those 70 beds and 2 operating theaters, we have got a general primary healthcare unit where we offer primary healthcare services to all age groups. And then we have a specialized pediatric clinic, a specialized non-communicable disease clinic with cardiologists, pulmonologists, and all the necessary supplies to take care of the non-communicable diseases. We have got a wound care unit where all the acute and as well as post-surgical patients come for dressing changes, which is rather crucial in a place like Gaza. Then we have surgical clinic with orthopedic surgeon, with general surgeon, as well as vascular surgeon. We have got an ENT clinic. It's one of the ignored specialities at this point in Gaza. So we decided to incorporate that into our package as well. And aside from that, we have a specialized mental health unit, which includes psychologists, psychiatrists, to take care of all patients who need mental health services. We have got an outpatient ambulatory therapeutic feeding center. So all those patients, especially children under 5 and pregnant and lactating women who have acute malnutrition, they are They're basically treated in that unit, and aside from that, there are several other nutrition programs that are incorporated in this unit. And then obviously we have got a sexual and reproductive health clinic where we do antenatal care, postnatal care, family planning, etc. So all in all, it's a very compact primary health care center along with capacity of 70 beds, 72 beds for inpatient care. On
This
daily
is
basis,
all in a field hospital, like as
this
in
is
sand and
yes,
tent. Yeah,
yes. So
incredible.
the Vaida, for instance, is established over 6,400 square meters.
Mm,
It's a piece of land, on the coast, on Al Rashid Road,
mm,
and Dar Al Bala as well. It's a it's a 6,200 square meter area where
mm,
we have set up about 40 something tents and divided them into different units, as I mentioned earlier.
mhm.
So these are our two health-centric program. But aside from this, we have got a very robust WASH program, water and sanitation program. As you know, in Gaza, access to water is rather compromised. Sanitation services are totally disrupted. So the entire Gaza is basically a big sewage network at this point, quite honestly. So we have got a very robust water and sanitation program. Aside from that, we have got women and girls safe spaces as part of our protection program. We have got also a child protection program, which is very close to my heart personally. This is a project where we on daily basis get hundreds of kids. They are involved in group activities and as well as individual activities depending on specific needs of the child. You already mentioned about the number of unaccompanied minors. It's very, very high in Gaza. So we see a lot of those cases in our child protection program, and we use this multi-sectoral approach to treat and rehabilitate those patients. So all in all, it's a pretty it's quite a big project that extends from the north to the south of Gaza. And then on the nutrition side, you already narrated the vast majority of the population being in food insecurity. So in order to deal with food insecurity and access to nutritional services, we launched a Gaza-wide program that's called Find and Treat. So basically, the intention was to because people have difficulty getting to the health facility, so we decided to hire volunteers and send them to shelters to basically screen children and pregnant lactating women to see to identify patients of malnutrition and treat them there and then. So we have got 1,200 volunteers that work from the north to the south of Gaza, basically identifying children and pregnant lactating women with acute malnutrition and treating them. And obviously, we have got a general response or outbreak response arm of the emergency team inside Gaza. So, for instance, now we have polio. Before this, we were responding to hepatitis A and as well as to the outbreak of impetigo. So we have got a team, a kind of an elite team within team that basically responds to acute public health issues as well. So it's a big project, and it's a big team. We've got about 900 individuals, as I mentioned earlier. And
And those are 900 local staff that
yes,
you from Gaza, which is
yes.
wonderful. And you did mention that you had around, was it 18 expat staff?
Yeah, so initially when we planned the hospital, we had planned for 44 expats because we
Mhm,
didn't know Gaza that well, quite honestly, and we certainly underestimated the talent of Gaza.
mhm.
But soon after we started the hospital, we realized that the medical team there is absolutely incredible. The surgeons are one of the best I've seen in the field. The medical doctors, the nurses, they're absolutely amazing. So we reduced our team right there and then. We slashed it from 44 down to about 12, and then now we are only bringing in people that are required for specific aspects of the project. So currently we have got about 18 experts, we have got 900 national staff, and we've got 1,200 volunteers. We are a big family. Yeah.
1,200 volunteers, that's quite a big number given the circumstances you are all living in. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, and you have had to move the hospitals at least twice, am I right?
Yes.
So what does that look like? Dismantling this whole thing, like, and then moving it to another area. That's got to be insane.
Yeah, it was a big challenge. When we were establishing the hospital with a very specialized team, that came in to set up the tents. These are specialized tents, inflatable tents. That team was trained by our partner in Netherlands, and they came in and set up the structure, and then they left. So things were working out for us. For 2 months we didn't have any trouble working in Maraj area. But then, we had to evacuate. So for the first 2 months of our establishment or work in Gaza, we were based in a place called Miraj, which was at the intersection of Rafah and Khan Yunis. Our intention was to be, as you mentioned, as a first responder, we wanted to be as close to the population in need as possible. So we couldn't establish our hospital inside Khan Yunis. We tried, but the area was not deconflicted. So we had to establishes close to Khan Yunis. The Khan Yunis operation was expected to start back then. So we managed to run the hospital throughout the Khan Yunis incursion. It was difficult. It was challenging. It was at times it felt kind of impossible. But we managed to run our hospital up until 31st of March, and then we saw that it was becoming operationally impossible to stay in that area. The strikes were getting very close to the hospital. It was becoming very challenging for our national staff to reach the hospital. And then, the population was also shifting because IDF at that time was, gradually, well, at least they were making the intentions clear of, let's say, starting the military activity in Rafah as well. So this place was half in Rafah and half in Khan Yunis. So we were kind of in the wrong place. So we had to move the hospital. It was challenging because we had 80 patients admitted with us. We had at that moment 7 patients in the ICU, and shifting the hospital in a context where you have to coordinate every single movement out of your facility was very challenging. But we managed to pull it. To pull it off. We had a very good team. We had planned for this in February because we saw this coming. So we had about 4 to 6 weeks of preparation. So we had already identified a site in Mawasi area, and we already had prepared the land to set up the tents. And then when the time came, some of our other peer organizations that supported us a lot. So we managed to refer about 24 of those 80 patients to MSF to accommodate them there. And then with the remaining patients, what we did was we took half of the tents, we established a mirror hospital in Mawasi, and then we started shifting the patients there. It was challenging, it was dirty, it was difficult, it was it was all happening at a point where military activity was getting more and more intense. But we managed to get that done in about 72 hours period. And then that prepared us very well for the second evacuation, which was from Mawasi Rapa to the Bala. That one was far more challenging, but yeah, we managed to do that. Yeah.
So when we, during over these past 11 months or so, we when you speak to aid workers, people that are very, very seasoned, people in the humanitarian crisis sort of context, and almost I think all of them say they have never seen anything of this scale. They've never seen the scale of destruction, of suffering, of injuries, of death. It's just sort of beyond anything they've ever experienced. And these are people that have been in the field for like 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to ask you, sort of as the leader of this whole operation, how do you keep yourself and your team safe? How do you manage to stay there for like you said, 8 months straight, just
Mm-hmm.
little breaks? And also, what are some of the sort of the most difficult decisions that you've had to make in this
Mm-hmm.
capacity and in this time?
Yeah, so the first part of the question is quite interesting from many perspectives. I think the way we work in Gaza is that we only plan our operations for one day at a time. So we have a grand operational plan, obviously. So for us as International Medical Corps, we've got 2 hospitals. So our plan is to maintain and sustain our activities, for as long as we can in both the hospitals. But in order to do that, we plan our work in days. first in weeks and then days. So we live one day at a time, because Gaza is so unpredictable in so many ways that you don't know what's going to happen next. Like you mentioned, we moved the hospital twice. And on both the occasions, it was rather an instantaneous decision to abandon that site and move the entire apparatus to a new site. So you kind of develop this instinct in Gaza, where you basically plan your operation in days. It's in many ways, Gaza is the worst that anybody has seen. The level of destruction is immense. um, it gives you kind of an eerie feeling when you look around, because you see nothing but utter destruction. I've traveled from the north to the south, from east to the west in Gaza, and everywhere you go, there's sheer destruction. The people are exhausted. They have been displaced like 8, 10 times since the start of the war. Practically every single person has lost somebody in their family. Most of them have lost their homes and their houses, and obviously their livelihoods as well. So aside from this destruction, you see a totally demoralized kind of community that has exhausted all its inherent defense mechanisms. So it is very, very challenging. So from that perspective, obviously Gaza is the worst that anybody has seen. In most of these emergencies, when we deploy as an emergency response team, there's always a system of healthcare inside the country, either run by the Ministry of Health or otherwise, that you can lean on to. So your response is very often to support that existing infrastructure or industry or system. In Gaza, it doesn't exist. So Gaza's health system is down to its knees. All the hospitals are closed. It was both a proud and a sad moment for us. I remember when we were told by the the health cluster in the Ministry of Health that IMC will serve as the main trauma referral hospital from here on. This was just before the Rafah invasion was starting. It was a very sad moment for us because this is what the health care system had come to. And a hospital in tent, a makeshift hospital, no matter how much glorious I make it sound, but at the end of the day, it's a field hospital. It became the main lifeline for the entire population of Gaza. So it was a very, 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 very sad day. So from many perspectives, yes, Gaza is something that we have not seen before. But at the same time, I mean, if you look around in the humanitarian world, there's a crisis of a massive magnitude in Sudan, which is unlike any other country as well in their respective manner. It's the same in Ukraine right now. There's at least 20% of the population is on the front line, and they are living through this horror of war. So it would not be, I think, fair to say that that other contexts do not have these type of challenges or issues of their own. But obviously, from a destruction perspective, from the perspective that in Gaza, 100% of the population is affected. You don't find that in any other country. The number of people who have died in Gaza, and if you take that number as a proportion of the population that lives in the country, it's definitely one of the, if not the worst, and one of the worst since the Second World War. So it's a very, very challenging context. And then operationally speaking, the feasibility of your operation is always in question, because the security, the access to supplies, access to material, access to clean running water, ensuring that that your health facility is connected to electricity, all these things, which we very often take for granted in many similar emergencies, they don't even exist in Gaza. So it is operationally a nightmare, and it's even emotionally, physically, mentally, it's extremely demanding. So from any perspective, I would agree with my colleagues from the humanitarian world that yes, it's one of the worst that we have seen. I think one thing that makes it probably the worst is that I remember the first time when we responded to a mass casualty. This was around 13th of January, a week after we started the field hospital. The first tranche of patients that were brought to the hospital, they were brought on donkey carts, so there were no ambulances. All the patients were children, all of them, and it was our first real introduction to Gaza. So the first 5 or 6 patients that were brought in, they were all kids, and yeah, from that perspective, the amount of suffering that you see, and more so in the vulnerable age groups, it's just incredible. So yeah, I understand why people refer to as the worst that they've seen in their life.
And I also wanted to add that according to the Aid Worker Security Database, which is an open source that sort of tracks all the attacks on aid workers and such, since October 7, there has been a documented 308 incidents of targeting aid workers in Gaza. I'm not going to talk about the number that have actually lost their lives as a result of these targets, because that's very macabre at this point talking to you. But this is an astounding sort of situation to be in, where you cannot even rely on being safe and protected in these kind of circumstances. So, you know, how do you work through that with your team? And especially for someone that keeps going back, I mean, it speaks to sort of the commitment of team. So how do you guys deal with that situation?
I mean, I don't think there's a gold standard here, or let's say kind of a lodestar that you would follow. I think it's very much individualistic. I think from an organizational perspective, being a first responder, we have several mechanisms in which we ensure the safety and security of our teams and as well as their well-being. We have very stringent security measures. We, like all the organizations that operate in Gaza, we coordinate very closely with COGAT in terms of our operations, our movements, our whereabouts. And then obviously from a mental health perspective, we have certain ways in which we ensure the mental health well-being of our team. But I think all of that on one side, I think one thing um, that has kind of helped us in maintaining our own sanity is that we are like-minded people. We see that the suffering those people are going through is far worse than the little discomfort that we feel in being in Gaza. And the kind of rewarding experience that we get, or the gratifying feeling that we get after treating the patients who are injured, or providing support to those that are in need. It in itself is a protective mechanism. And then obviously all these 18 people and the rest of the 900 people that we have inside Gaza, we are very closely knitted with each other. I think what makes this project remarkable is that we don't have hospitals. We have got little towns, because that's the environment that we have inside our hospital. We know our patients really well. We talk to each other. We live inside the hospital. So at any given moment, aside from 200 plus patients that are admitted in both the hospitals combined, we also have their attendants. We have got our medical and non-medical teams that are inside the hospital. So the environment itself is very, very fulfilling, if I must say. So we thoroughly enjoy our work. It's a feeling of being privileged, that we get by being inside Gaza. So I think all these factors combined, they help us in maintaining our sanity and our well-being. Yeah.
And I want to note that to everyone listening to us today, in our conversations before this webinar, Dr. Javed insisted that I do not mention or refer to any of his work as a sacrifice, which seeing as that you're, and I understand, of course, in the scale of suffering, it's hard, but also I'm sure for your family and the people that love you, I'm sure they would think differently. So. Anyway, I wanted to also ask you, so we hear a lot about the indomitable spirit of the Palestinians and just their
Mhm.
extraordinary resilience. Can you tell us a little bit of examples of that you've experienced, or just the general kind of your general experience with these very brave and resilient people?
Oh, they're absolutely amazing. Honestly, I remember the moment when I crossed into Gaza. It was 25th of December. On 27, we had a team meeting. At that time, my team was rather small. We all fitted in one small room, and we were talking about how we're going to start the hospital and what each person is supposed to do. And that's where I met the initial Gaza national staff team, which were about 22 people at that time who attended the meeting. And they all were so keen and enthusiastic to help and build and support and sustain the hospital. All of them were displaced from Gaza North. They had gone through a lot, but they were very motivated, far more than myself. establish the hospital and to run it. I think this Palestinian spirit, you see it in everyone inside Gaza. People are extremely tough and resilient. I've got 1,000 examples, quite honestly. I mean, I before coming out, I was speaking to one of my patients. She's only 18 years old. She's amputated above knee. She has lost her right eye. She's one of the patients admitted inside the hospital, but she wanted to create this patient support network inside the hospital, basically for the new patients who come in with similar injuries, etc. Takes them a bit of time to readjust their life with their temporary or transient or permanent disability. So she, while herself going through so much, she's still willing to help others. All those 800 plus 900 staff that we have, they come to work on daily basis, despite the fact that they have lost their homes, they have lost their loved ones, they have mourned, they have suffered, but they still want to come to work and help. Even those people who are not on the roster, they're always in the hospital, basically to help and support in any way, shape, or form that's possible. I've got a 7-year-old patient inside the hospital, Anas. He's absolutely fabulous. He's just 7 years old, but he's so mature that he's the patron of the pediatric trauma surgical ward, where we have children with amputation, children with chest tubes, and but he keeps their spirit high. Like everybody you meet in Gaza. I think one thing I would, however, say is that I think you started off with it. People are suffering. I think very often we talk about their resilience, we talk about their strength, we talk about how um, how they are coping with all this. But the fact is, they're human beings. They're suffering. They have exhausted all means of coping with this crisis. They're tired of multiple displacements. They want to rebuild their lives. They want to live in peace, just like any of us. That's our natural instinct as human beings. So right now they're under survival instinct, and when you are in survival mode, you don't really have a choice. You're not an individual part of a family. You have kids, you have your loved ones. You want to save them, you want to protect them, you want to fit to get basic needs or means of sustenance. So I while this resilience is exuberating from the community, their suffering is immense.
Yeah.
It's unimaginable.
Yes. In the midst of all this suffering that you and of course the people of Palestine are experiencing, what gives you hope? Like I noticed in our conversation again before this talk, you said the word hope many times. And,
Mhm.
I find it incredible that in the midst of all this you kept going back to that word of hope. So tell me how do you hold on to the hope? How do you even create that hope for yourself and for those around you? I mean,
Well,
we don't see an end in sight. So it's just day after day after month
mhm,
after, how do
mhm.
you keep that hope alive?
Well, first of all, it's natural because it has to come to an end. This cannot go on for long. This thing has to come to an end. And I do believe I've seen the courage and the patience and the passion of the Palestinian community. So once safety and security and peace and tranquility will return to the region, they would be able to rebuild their lives, because they are determined to do that. They are committed to do it, and they have done it before. After several wars that this particular population has faced in the last 60 50 years or so, they've always managed to do it, and I see it in them. I'm positive that they would be able to get their life back on track once peace and safety returns to the region. And secondly, I feel like a Gazan community member, because we have shared that space with them. We have been displaced several times. There were times where we didn't have food or water. Um, you know, um, so we kind of experienced what they are going through, and I've got to know a lot of them in those 7 8 months. As I mentioned, we have got almost 900 staff that work with us on daily basis. And then you see people like Anas, people like Isra, people like Muhammad, like Nadal, who are full of potential. It's just that they're waiting for the right time. So I mean, there's a lot to be hopeful for. We have seen wars, you know, in the past that have come to an end, and the communities have rebuilt themselves. I mean, the latest example is of Rwanda, where after a massive genocide, the country managed to course correct itself and is on a track of sustainability and development. And I certainly hope that for Gaza as well. I think their story is now being heard throughout the world, not just in the region. So I do believe that this will come to an end at some point, and the people in Gaza would be able to get the grasp of their life again, and they would be able to build it through. So yeah, I mean, I have a 5-year-old daughter, and she and my elder one, they want to be humanitarian workers. They want to help Gaza. So even if a 5-year-old child has this ambition to do something for Gaza, I do believe that we have a critical mass now around the world um, that can help and support that Palestinian population to rebuild their life once this war is over. So there's a lot to be hopeful for. Yeah.
That's incredible that you're able to keep that spirit up in the midst of all this suffering and destruction. So, and if you want, talking to everyone here, what is something that you would want us all to understand, or just people to understand about your work on the front lines, about what's happening in there? What are the most urgent needs? How can someone like us, just we're
Mhm.
watching this program, where do you think our efforts are best put? What can we do? I mean, so many of us feel so incredibly helpless, and just having not experienced anything like of this magnitude before, and it just keeps going and doesn't stop and seemingly gets worse. Do you have any advice for us, like how we can actually make change, help? What can we do? And what do
Yeah,
you want us all to know?
I don't have an advice, but I do have my opinion, and I think we can extrapolate from that. Well, first of all, I think um, you started the conversation by reading out those numbers. I think we are getting used to those numbers. Now in the news, when you turn it on, you hear that 50 people or 70 people were killed because of an airstrike. I mean, those are people. You know, I know so many of them who lost their life in this 8 month journey. There are sons, there are husbands, there are brothers, there are sisters. So this suffering that those people are going through, it's real. We talk about the resilience, we talk about their strength, we talk about um, their commitment to rebuild their life. But the fact of the matter is, they are human beings. They bleed, they feel the pain, they suffer, they get hungry, they feel thirst. And right now in Gaza, they don't have any of that luxury. There are no homes, there are no safe shelters, there are no safe places. There's not enough water. There is no absolutely non-existent sewage system. The streets are flooded with sewage. And then you won't find soap in the market. You won't find shampoo in the market. You won't find items, basic items in the market. And even if you do, if you're lucky to find those would be too expensive for you to afford. Um, I think everybody talks about cigarettes, but for us, cigarette is a good gauge of inflation in Gaza. So before I was leaving, one stick of cigarette was about $50. Yeah, so you can imagine a packet of cigarettes is $1,000 in Gaza. So that is what life looks like and feels like in Gaza. Um, and I think what you can do is you can advocate for people to have safe access to services. You can advocate for, you can tell their stories in terms of what they're going through. You can support, in whatever shape and form you can. If you're a doctor, a nurse, a professional who has got enough experience in this field, please deploy to Gaza. Please help and support in any way, shape, or form that you can. If you have enough resources, please donate to organizations that are working in there. The needs are huge. the needs that we are able to meet is not even 15% of what is required. So no matter what we do, we would never be able to fulfill all the needs of the population. So there's a lot that needs to be done, and I think we are living in an age where access to information is rather simple. It's very inexpensive. So you basically would be able to see what those people are going through their vlogs, through the news, etc., etc. And there are several mechanisms, and when this forum is one good mechanism where you connect individuals to organizations, philanthropists, to implementers. So do whatever you can. This is not the time to sit idle. I think we all need to do whatever we can, either through our time and effort or through resources that we can mobilize. And if not, we can at least advocate for peace and safety of the population inside Gaza.
Okay. What about, and just sort of on a sort of a closing note a little bit, I wanted you told me something as well in our talk before about how the 18, I think, expats that you actually have trouble making them go
Yes.
on their R&R.
Yeah, they're
That's
absolutely committed. They're incredible people, and I am absolutely fond of them. They're my brothers and sisters, my partners in crime and relief. Absolutely incredible people. Each one of them is full of zest, courage, enthusiasm, and the will to help and support. And I think in the beginning, we all were, a bit. We were feeling insecure, quite honestly, when we were crossing the border. But once you get into Gaza and you get acclimatized, in that environment with the buzzing drone above your head and the bomb blasts and strikes that go around your guest houses, it takes you a while to get used to it. But once you do and you see the results of your work, you start feeling meaningful and valuable. And I think that's what is keeping us all together. Our project is absolutely meaningful and valuable and rewarding in Gaza. It's fulfilling a need, a gap that exists, and we see our patients getting the treatment that they need and they deserve. I mean, it's a hospital where we conduct 60 major surgeries a day. It's not a small project. It's a place where we see 1,500 to 2,000 patients every single day in our clinic, and every day we have 15 to 20 deliveries happening. Newborns being born in our hospital. So you see the results of your work, whether you're a logistician, whether you're an HR person hiring people, or whether you are a lab manager or an OT manager or a doctor for that matter. You see that individually, with the little, let's say, skill set that we have, when you combine that in a team, it results in something magnificent and something beautiful and something absolutely invaluable. And I think that keeps us together. And I think I wouldn't call them a team members. I wouldn't call them staff. They are really, we
family.
have bonded so well. They are family. Yeah.
Mhm.
And I kind of miss them when I'm out with my family. So
Can't believe that.
absolutely incredible
That's
people.
amazing. That's amazing. There's a question for you from Mahmoud Hamada. He says, you have mentioned that you have reduced your expats as you find great capacities and experience in Gaza. In fact, there are very talented and experienced local civil society organizations working in the health sector, and I'm sure you have met many of them. What are IMC plans for localization and transfer of expertise to those organizations?
So, I mean, this is what we are doing currently. We have got Caritas. That's one of our implementing partner. We are funding them for implementing mobile clinics around Gaza. We have Baitona. Baitona provides home-based physiotherapy for patients who are discharged from hospital. So a lot of times patients are unable to come to their follow-ups. There's no transportation in Gaza, and otherwise these post-surgical patients have to walk for kilometers to get to a nearest service delivery point. So Baitona, the local organization funded by IMC, is providing home-based care for those patients. And then we have Jazur, we have got other CBOs or community-based organizations that we support. We intend to further expand on this in the coming months, I think right now there is no local organization that has the capacity to run a tertiary level hospital at this point. So our intention basically, and the reason why we want to stick with predominantly national staff-led team is so that we can leave this both structure as well as the intellectual capacity behind to help Gaza. So that's the reason why we are directly implementing this hospital. And at some point, if we see that there's a local organization that can do it either in the same manner as IMC does it or even better, then we would have no problem in handing this off. But we don't see that right now. All those organizations also have limited their scope and reach because of the insecurity. Caritas, in fact, had to suspend their programs for a couple of days because of the evacuation notices and the incursion of Rafah. And similarly, Baitona had to readjust their activities because of that. So we work very closely with those organizations, and localization is part of our objectives for work, not just in Gaza, but globally.
Right.
So,
And that
yeah.
brings us back to that number that I said at the beginning, which is, I think 96% of your staff are local.
Yes.
That's amazing. That's really amazing. Dr. Javed, I want to thank you so much. We just have a couple of more minutes left. I just also want to mention on a personal note, when we were talking before in the interview, but when we were talking leading up to this talk, I was literally moved to tears by some of the things you said and your commitment and your just I'm so inspired by you and your team and everyone that works in this capacity. I mean, what we're seeing on a daily basis is insane, and to think that you are putting you and your time and effort and life in what is actually kind of the most deadly place right now, I believe. Um, so on behalf of everyone, I want to thank you and thank your team. And I want to thank you again for taking the time out of your with your family, your very precious time to speak with us. And I wish you safety and well-being. And I hope we hear from you again, maybe hopefully at the end of this, to hear more about your experiences and everything that you were able to accomplish there. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me, and thanks for the opportunity. And good luck with whatever you guys are doing. I think it's incredible to keep the global community informed about the developments inside Gaza and to mobilize the civil society to do whatever they can to help the people who are suffering inside. So good luck with that noble cause, and remember us in your prayers.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. We're going to be back on the 18th of this month. We're going to be talking to two of people working in the education for children in Gaza and for college age children, and that's also going to be very important conversation, because many of these all the children actually have lost a year in terms of education so far. So hopefully you'll join us then. And again, thank you, Dr. Javed, and thank you everyone for joining.
Salam.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Bye.